Hello, everybody. I'm a practicing therapist and a doctoral student of psychology. A lot of y'all were asking on my main channel what are some of the factors that actually help a man to commit in a relationship. And today we're going to talk about those things by using some research, and I'm going to have that research in the description box, okay? So the first one is we're going to talk about the emotional connection. Emotional intimacy is often a fundamental for individuals who are looking for commitment. Now, this is even more particular with avoidant men, and we're going to talk about that a little bit throughout. But one thing I will mention is no matter what the man, they tend to prefer relationships where they feel understood and accepted and emotionally safe with their partner. This helps them to feel more likely to commit. Now, there are studies that show, and there's so many studies, but I'm going to show the one that I was looking at. Emotional satisfaction predicts long-term commitment much more than physical attraction alone. I think a lot of people don't recognize that. And this emotional satisfaction is even more prominent for avoidant individuals. And this is the part I was talking about. Avoidant men, avoidance in general, they don't look at some of the variables that other people do as prominently. While physical attraction is very important, they tend to not think that matters too much because their value is not about a lot of these external factors. Avoidant individuals particularly are very focused on what can add to my life because I want to be as independent as possible. So unless this thing adds to me and makes my life easier, maybe I shouldn't accept it because I don't want to be somebody who is needy or who isn't independent, because when they were younger, they were taught you have to be independent. You have to be me, myself, and I. And so their mind has already been modeled in such a way where unless it adds to you, they're not going to let it in. And so a physical attraction, especially avoidant men, that's not really even a factor towards commitment, barely, right? If you take care of yourself and you're working hard, they like hard work, that's much more important than the physical aspect, right? And so emotional satisfaction comes from feeling accepted, feeling understood, emotionally safe, right? We already see that that's a very huge, significant part of it, okay? So any man, emotional connection is very important, but emotional connection in the way where they feel accepted, right? It's a little bit different from some other individuals. Now, a lot of men, especially secure men, this is really important, compatibility and shared values. A lot of avoidant men may feel this way as well, but it might be a little different, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But particularly secure men, they really want to see shared goals, beliefs, values, and life direction. This increases the likelihood of commitment. Now, with anxious men, they prefer where the relationship goals. That's the most important part for anxious men. If you guys have the same relationship goals, then the other areas are not as important. So as long as you guys want to get married, you want to have kids, or whatever your goals are, that makes anxious men more likely to want to commit because they are starting to see that. Avoidant men, on the other hand, they are even more specific about these things, even more than secure men. They want to see that you have a similar life direction that they do. They want to see that you have a similar emotional regulation pattern. Doesn't have to be the same, but you can still regulate your emotions. They want to see that you have a similar value, not just religious beliefs or career or whatever you want to call it, but maybe the value towards fitness, maybe the value towards money, maybe the value towards other things. So avoidant individuals pick these apart even more specifically than secure individuals, and anxious individuals are less particular, but they just hold one much more powerful, if that makes sense. So research actually does suggest that couples with more aligned core values actually report, like they both individuals in the relationship report higher marital and relationship satisfaction and stability. They perceive that their relationship is more happier, satisfying, and stable by having these goals, okay? The next one is the most, I think anxious men hold this much more dear to their heart, but secure and avoidant as well. This factor makes men commit in general. It's that they see the reciprocal investment, okay? When a man feels that their efforts are matched emotionally, physically, mentally, they're more likely to invest long-term, okay? And this is even more particular with anxious men. If an anxious man can see that they are not just they're just working so hard, the relationship is so imbalanced, if they can see that it's equal, they feel much more appreciated. For avoidant men, they don't want to feel like you're playing games. That's why avoidant men find this very important. If you're still investing and you're still consistent, they feel very much like this relationship is valuable because you're a person who's emotionally stable, okay? So the independence theory does show that commitment does increase when the perceived benefits of the relationship outweighs the cost, right? Whereas the alternative is actually very much less appealing. And so what does that mean? It means that they feel like their investment is making progress. Most men feel this way, and even more so if they're avoidant. As long as there's progress, this is very appreciative. Now, for anxious men, they like to see the progress much more obvious, to which they may need a bit more verbal recognition. But regardless, this helps men commit very much, okay? The next one is timing. This one is even more particular to secure men and avoidant men, but much more for secure. In a secure man, they tend to commit more likely when they feel they're emotionally ready to commit, okay? Where their life stage is aligned with their goals. Secure men really do take their time with this one. That means that a secure man might have avoided commitment in their early 20s, but they may be more willing to commit in their 30s. Whereas an avoidant individual, they may avoid commitment even in their 50s, right? And anxious individuals might be more willing to commit in their 20s. And so this is way more particular to secure men. But regardless, if they feel emotionally safe and stable, most men are more willing to commit than, not feeling emotionally stable. So there is research that suggests that secure men in their late 20s to early 30s are more statistically likely to seek long-term partnerships. And this is in general, actually, avoidant men, even anxious men, they tend to prefer seeking those long-term relationships basically after they've exited their 20s or in their late 20s, okay? The next one is security and trust. This one is even more particular to avoidant men. Anxious men, this is not as important. Secure men, it's important as well. But anxious men too. A stable, drama-free, what they might call it, avoidant men might call it drama-free. But in general, a stable, maybe not as high-frequency argument-forward relationship builds trust. If a man feels secure in a relationship and they feel like it's peaceful, they are much more likely to commit. This one is the most for avoidance. If it's peaceful, avoidant men tend to feel like this is much more safe. They're more willing to hear you out. They're more allowed to be themselves. Now, any man in general might feel more connected to this, and secure men tend to form long-term bonds more readily if there's not that up and down, and much more also avoidant men, okay? The next one is that they actually want some physical compatibility, much more common with anxious and secure men. They want to understand there is a physical attraction, that you are attracted to them, they are attracted to you, and that they're compatible. Avoidant individuals, the way they lean this more is that the way you take care of yourself is more compatible. So you have a fitness routine, or let's say the avoidant man really is particular about, staying hydrated. They want to see that you align in that way. And so to them, that translates to physical compatibility. And so it's a little bit different, but this does regardless foster deeper connection and ongoing commitment and attraction, okay? And it does show that there is research, this is not necessarily for all men, but sexual satisfaction does in general correlate to emotional stability, relationship closeness, okay? The next one is a biological factor. Often men, based on evolutionary biology and evolutionary psychology, it does suggest that men commit more when they perceive their partner as a good long-term partner, right? And so that means that they're looking for someone who is potentially nurturing, loyal, supportive, able to pick up slack when they're lacking slack. So they're looking at the long-term picture. Are you a good partner statistically? Are you a good partner from the actual traits? If we break down the traits, are you going to be there for them even when they're at a low time? Are you going to leave them if they don't have money? Are you going to be there for them regardless of maybe they're having a little bit of a low moment and you're able to support them? Are you there for them and you believe in them even when they don't believe in themselves? This is very important. Men value these types of behaviors even more so than women based on some research. Depends though, right? Of course, everything is we don't always know. Take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt. But commitment increases when these traits are perceived in a partner. Truthfully, I'm just being honest with you, okay? And the next one is they feel absence of threats in the relationship. This is very important, especially if the man is avoidant. If he is much less likely to commit if he feels like there is manipulation in the relationship, there is control. He may feel like if there's frequent arguments or insecurity in the relationship, constant picking, he might feel less likely to commit. He may feel less likely to commit if there's lack of respect or appreciation. And often it's because men in general, but especially avoidant men, they often feel like commitment is only valuable if the relationship adds to them, which typically they perceive that as peace, not pressure, okay? And the very last one is particular with all men, but much more particular with avoidant men. They tend to commit when they've just been with you for a long time. Like, it's just, I can't even tell you much more than that. If you guys have been together for like 5 years, yeah, you're probably the one they're going to get married to. That's just, it's not always the case. Some secure men, they might feel like, okay, after a long time in the relationship, they might realize this is not a good fit. I'm going to go ahead and look for someone who's a better fit because you're not doing X, Y, and Z. And anxious men do that too. But avoidant men, they just don't look at those things as detailed. So they just are more willing to commit if they've been with you for a long time. This is not always the case, but it's important to recognize this is a huge factor for avoidant men especially, okay? I hope this video was helpful to somebody. Please like, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.